How do you gear your character effectively? How do you get started crafting to progress to the end game? And how can you start making loads of currency to get super rich? I've created this video to answer those questions to help newer players get to grips with the basics and hopefully teach you some more easy but advanced techniques that will give you a great base to build your knowledge off. Now, let's get into it. Okay, so first up, let's talk about crafting, and you'll have found out straight away that upgrades are few and far between when you're just looking at your drops in Path of Exile 2, so you must engage with and get savvy with the crafting system. When you're progressing through the game, you'll often hit walls of difficulty, and if you don't keep your gear ahead of the curve, you're going to be in trouble. So let's look at this and break this down, and I'll give you some live examples of how to do this. So first of all, what you want to be doing is you want to be picking up white items that essentially are going to be things that you're going to want to use. So hypothetically, imagine we want to use this war pick. It's got a nice innate bonus there with a 39% critical damage bonus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my orb of transmutation and I'm going to put that on there, and it's given us accuracy rating, which isn't the best in the world, but it's okay. What we can then do is we can then take an orb of augmentation and pop this on there as well. And now we've got two stats. Now, this is a pretty rubbish roll, so what I would actually do essentially would be go and sell this because it's pointless having it, so I'd go disenchant that. However, here's an example of a set of boots that I've rolled that have got some okay starting stats. We've got max life and cold resistance on them, which is pretty good to start with. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to take this to the next level. I'm actually going to use one of my regal orbs and see what happens with it. So let's pop that on there now. So it's given us evasion rating, so that's not great. But if we'd have been in a situation where that had have rolled maybe another resistance or maybe 25-30% move speed, we'd be laughing, and that's how you get this type of thing, folks. This has got max life, movement speed, and chaos resistance on it. They are not the best, but they are a decent start. Now, you might be looking at these boots and thinking, but FaZe, there's only 3 lines of stats. How on earth do you get ones to have 6? Well, you can drop them with 6 or 5 or 4. That's great. But what you actually need to do, folks, is if you roll something in this situation that you're like, this is absolutely awesome, I want to keep going with it, you need to start using these bad boys. These are your exalted orbs. These are one of the rarer currencies in the game and are actually what you use to trade and sell things and buy things with. More on that later. That's really important. But this is what you would use. I'm not going to slam this with an exalt because it's not worth it, but essentially that's how you create boots like this. In fact, I'll show you this just to exemplify what I mean. I dropped this chest with max life, with fire resist and chaos resistance and all the evasion stuff. I then used an exalt and it gave me 30% lightning resistance. So this chest is a really, really decent chest. And later in the video, I'm going to show you how you can trade and value stuff, and I'll show you how much this one's worth. Now, sustaining your crafting is also incredibly important. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to show you a few cheeky methods and a couple of explanations around how you can get different crafting materials quickly and easily. And one that people often overlook, and I did personally at the start as well, is using the salvage bench to make sure that you keep on top of getting your socketable item materials. I'll explain what I mean here. If you use the salvage bench on some socketed items like this 2-socket crossbow or this 1-socketed helm, you get materials for it. So if I use salvage on this 1 socket, let's look what happens. Boom, I get 1 artificer's shard. And if I do it on the one with 2 sockets, I get 2 artificer shards. So that's incredibly important. And if you don't know what an artificer shard is, I'll just head over to my stash here and show you. An artificer shard allows us, once we have 10 of them, to make artificer orbs, and these are used to socket items. Give sockets rather to items that we can then put runes in. So you'll see my gear here is covered in runes, and we'll talk about this later on in the video and why they're important when we talk about gearing specifics and what you want to look for as a beginner player. But this is super important and people often overlook this. So my advice to you is when you're running around in the world killing stuff, if you see a socketed item drop, pick it up and bring it back with you, because they soon compounds and you soon end up with quite a lot of these bad boys. And I'll show you a little cheeky tip now. If you go into your interface options, and you will see here that it says, where is it? Items. always show sockets. You always want that to be on, because when you drop an item with a socket, it has a little white mark next to it, or 2 for a double socket. And then just make sure as well, little caveat here, always make sure that always highlight is ticked. For some reason, whenever there's a hotfix or a patch, this seems to be turned off, so make sure it comes back on. It just makes your life much easier and keeps you speedy and efficient. And on the topic of being speedy and efficient, I would also recommend, when you are running around killing stuff, especially when you get into the mapping phase of the game, or just when you're killing things quickly, keep your orbs of transmutation and your orbs of augmentation in small stacks in your bag at all times. What this allows you to do is, if you see something interesting that drops and you're like, oh, that could be good, you can just slam stuff in then and there, and if it ends up being trash, just drop it and move on. It saves you time in the long run, folks, and it keeps that cycle moving nicely. This same principle works when you're disenchanting items, so my tip here would be pick up all the yellows that you drop and also some of the good blues that you might want to smash. But the main thing is, if you look here, the yellows go for regal shards. 10 regal shards gets you a regal orb, which is one of these, which lets you level up a blue to a rare. You can see where I'm going with this. You've got to keep the flow of materials going as much as possible. It's a bit of a chore, but once you get savvy with it, it makes a huge difference. Don't sleep on it, folks. Now, if you've got the taste for wanting to make better items, you're going to need those exalted orbs. So this next technique I'm showing you is a bit of a more advanced technique for people who want to play the currency market a little bit more and delve into the trading side of things, but this will help you tenfold. I'm going to show you how to use Path of Exile trade, how this integrates with the game, what you need to do to make it happen, and let's just take a look here. So I mentioned this body armor early in the video. Now, this is a pretty decent drop. I used an exalted orb to get the lightning resistance on it, and it's got all 4 resistances on it now. So if we were to take a look on Path of Exile trade, and I've filled this out and I will put a link in the description so you can head over here if you want to take a look yourself and use it in your gameplay. I've set everything up so it's got its item category as body armor, its item rarity as rare, and then I've put some of the basics in the drop down. You add filters and it shows you all of the choices, so you could put things like maximum mana in there if you wanted to. We're not going to do that for this. I've already set this one up and searched, but essentially it will search for people that have put things on the market. And if we take a look here, people are offering or wanting to sell these for around 5 to 10 exalted orbs. Whether that's absolutely correct or not, I don't know, because I'm not selling it, but this is a great way, folks, of learning how to value your items. The more you do this, the quicker you will get at being able to value things in your head. You see those top streamers like Gazzy and people like that who just kind of pick an item up and just chuck it in a tab and go 10 exalted. Like, they know how much stuff is because they've done this so much. It's a really good way to start getting your head around what is useful. I know for a fact that anything with max life and all 4 resistances is going to be highly sought after, so it's a really good surefire sell. If I get an upgrade to this, this will be going straight on there for 5 to 10 exalted orbs. You catch my drift. I've just had to jump to the trade part of the video now because actually someone has just offered me something for one of my items, so I'll show you this in real time. This stash tab is our trade stash tab. I've listed this for 1 exalt on the trade market, and they've invited me via the trade site that I'm going to show you. So I'm just going to show you a transaction in process just so you can get to grips with how this works. I'm going to go to his hideout. He's come to me. Okay, so we're going to trade. So we right click, we're going to trade. He's offered me an exalt for this. Thank you, smiley face. Boom, we're done. We've made ourselves 1 exalted orb, and that's just from using the stash tab and the trade website that I've just shown you. It's really quick and easy, folks. Now, the way that this works in terms of the game is you need to come over to your stash tab, and you do need to buy one of the premium stash tabs that allows you to tick public on the stash tab, and then this lets you price things. And this is really simple. All you do is you right click on the item and it will bring you this box, and you can set things like exact price, negotiable price, blah, blah, blah. I've gone exact price, half an exalt, which is about 1 to 2 chaos orbs at the moment. Off the top of my head, I think it might have changed. Moving on to some basic gearing tips. Now, you can go absolutely ham with this. I'm just going to keep this really simple and straightforward. When you are gearing at the start of your experience with Path of Exile, the best things you want to be looking for are things with max life and resistance. This just gives you survivability and the ability in the end game to get started mapping and to clear the campaign if you're struggling there as well. You will get clapped if you do not have decent survivability unless you're playing some extreme glass cannon build, and I wouldn't recommend it at the start of your experience because you will not learn the mechanics of the game effectively. So here's a good example. We've already talked about this chest, but look at it. It's got max life. It's got all 4 resistances, both from rolls and from the rune slots. So that's another thing I'd say. Socket items using those artificer orbs and then use it to buff your resistances up on your gear pieces. This is a really nicely balanced item now that'll probably take me a while to upgrade. I imagine it'll be in the maps where I start dropping tier 2 and tier 3 items that occurs. The same thing goes for your helm. You want to be trying to get things like max life, maximum mana, loads of resistance, as much armor or evasion or energy shield or whatever you're looking for as possible. That goes for all your items. The higher that is, the better. You obviously will know yourself when you're looking at multipliers and things like that in your passive tree, what you need to be focusing on. Me personally, it's evasion rating mainly. So if you take a look at my stats, my evasion rating, we're not even in town, we're not even in combat, is at 75%. When I get 10 stacks of tailwind, that shoots up even further. I think it goes up to 85% or something crazy. So that's come down to me making sure that I've optimized my build around evasion. You catch my drift. In terms of your things like weapons, you want to be trying to get raw damage numbers over everything else if you want to up your damage. So this is an example here. I've got raw lightning damage twice that really ups my elemental damage, and there's also a multiplier there for the physical damage. What would have made this even better would be if we'd have managed to get rid of maybe gain life per killed enemy and turn that into a flat physical number for physical damage. The reason for this is flat numbers are then multiplied by the percentage, okay? So it doesn't work the other way around, and this catches people out sometimes. It is better to have flat numbers to your damage than just percentages. Golden place is having both, because it just multiplies it and sends it into another stratosphere. There's an example here on another bow that I had earlier in my playthrough that had lightning damage and it had increased elemental damage with attacks and flat damage to physical. In this particular instance, if I'd have had percentage physical damage as well, that would have pushed it even higher. So it takes the flat number and then the percentage multiplier and bangs them together to get your numbers. That's what you need to get your head around. And then, of course, things like increased attack speed on weapons are goated. Mana leech. So this bow has got physical damage as mana. They've just tweaked how leeching works. I haven't had the chance to fully experience it, but I'm hearing really good things. So that's good news to me because this build gets a little bit mana starved at times. And it's just really, really good to have things like physical damage as mana, attack speed, crit chance, crit damage, all that good stuff if that's the way you're leaning. I'd say that the attack stuff's pretty simple compared to the resistance and whatnot. In terms of rings, you've got cold resistance in there and attack speed on this one. That's really nice, a bit of mana regen. Over here, you've got lightning resistance, fire resistance, cold resistance, mana and a bit of life and a bit of strength to help things out as well. But I will show you, when talking about rings, a little tip I can give new players is have a bunch of rings that you are happy with that have different sort of pairings and differences with the resistances. The reason for that is sometimes you'll come into an area that's got insane fire damage, so you can switch the rings around to make your resistances match what's going on there. And also, on the topic of rings, things like flat damage are really effective here. This one's got some fire res and some flat lightning damage. This one's got loads of nice flat damage to it and a load of fire resistance. So if I ever found something that kind of allowed me to just stack a load of fire resistance into my ring, this would be a great one. At the moment, it makes my resistances too imbalanced, so I'm not using it. But the point is, I've got all these rings to mix and match as I go, and you can do the same with your amulet as well. You just want to be stacking as much resistance. I'm in Cruel at the moment, and I've got some okay resistances. They're not absolutely great, but I'm working on them. They're definitely better than having 10%, because you just get absolutely obliterated at the start of mapping if you don't have resistances, folks. Gloves, you can see it here again. I've got flat physical damage to attacks, flat fire. I've got max life. I've got crit damage bonus. I've got fire resistance. Again, it's not the best in the world, but they're doing all the right things. You just need to be picking and choosing the right combinations that balance your build out. You can also get leech on gloves, which is also really, really nice as well. And of course, you'll be noticing every single socketable item is socketed on my build. That is very simply because it can give it increased lightning damage. We can add the cold resistance. We can patch the holes in items. This drop had no cold resistance on it after I'd rolled the Exile on it. So I thought, you know what, let's make it really balanced. We've got 24% cold resistance from our runes. It's pretty self-explanatory, but at first it's a bit overwhelming, but this really does up the ante in terms of your gearing choices. Check out this next video. It's got you covered. Take care of yourselves, keep having fun, come check out a stream on YouTube or Twitch, and I'll see you in the next one.